Welcome back to another episode of the Newt News Podcast. It's myself and Sandy here today, and we're joined by a special guest, friend of the podcast here, Caleb Noble. He's one of the co-hosts of the Hard Nine podcast. They put out some awesome content, Cardinals content on there, so I'm sure many of you have seen it before, but if not, definitely go check out the Hard Nine podcast and subscribe there. You can check out Caleb Noble on Twitter at Caleb Noble08. But Caleb, how are you doing today, man?
Doing well. Thanks for the kind words. I'm excited to talk about Oli. Definitely the most controversial figure in Cardinal baseball, maybe besides Mozeliak right now. So I'm excited.
Yeah.
This can't go wrong, I don't think. No way.
No, there's no way we're going to upset anyone in this podcast.
No way. No way.
Sandy, how are you feeling going into our Oli chat today?
I'm excited. I think, honestly, it's going to be a little less controversial than some people might be hoping. I've been accused of holding Mo's water. You've been accused of holding Mo's water. I don't know if Caleb's quite a Mo water carrier, but also I'm not sure he's the super fiery type either. But it's going to be good. I think it's going to be a productive discussion.
Yes.
No, I prefer not to be super fiery on the Twitterverse. It doesn't work out well for me, so I've stopped.
Yeah, it doesn't seem to necessarily make a difference. So I think sometimes people are like, why don't you call for more? It's like, I know the Cardinals are never going to spend like the Dodgers. So why would I waste my brain space like getting mad about it? Can they do more?
They also don't care what we call for at all. They don't care.
Yeah, exactly.
Hey, go send Yamamoto. They don't care.
Cool.
They don't care.
They do not care what we think. But maybe one day, maybe Heim Bloom will. But let's start off with this. I just did a poll on Twitter, so it's pretty early, so it's hard to tell. But I wanted you guys to guess, what do you think the overall perception of Oli Marmol amongst Cardinal fans is? Sandy, what do you think?
I mean, I kind of lean towards most Cardinals fans aren't super upset that Oli's back. I think there's a loud minority that really wanted him gone last season. I would say you probably have somewhere between 60 to 70% of people that are fine with it.
Okay. Caleb, what about you, man?
I think a lot of Cardinal fans don't like Oli Marmol. Just from my experience, the loud minority is a real thing, but considering you put this poll on Twitter, that's where they reside.
It's true.
Yeah.
So I do think that a lot of them probably said, we don't like this guy. That's my thought.
Okay. I was the same way. I was like, it's Twitter. They're going to burn the place down. So again, this is early. This could really change quickly. But so far, 77% of people think he's in a prove it year. 11% said he's the right guy, and 11% said he needed to be fired. Now, I probably could have done a better job with that question and maybe put like two middle grounds, like, hey, it's a prove it year, but I don't think he's the right guy, and it's a prove it year, I think he's the right guy. It might have been a little bit better. But still, I thought people were going to smash the he should be fired button, because that's what people are always talking about. Whenever you see an Oli Marmol tweet, 9 times out of 10, it's like, why is he the manager of the Cardinals?
Yeah.
Do you think that's probably a better I know, again, we talked about how Twitter can be a little bit more of a heated space. Where do you think a lot of that Oli negativity started from or came from? Do you think that's because of how things went in 2023, or do you think this is a symptom of from the very beginning when he took the reins going into 2022?
I think it's
because Sandy,
go ahead, Sandy. Sorry.
I think it's because of 2023, because I remember myself going into the season being like, oh, Oli's fine. I didn't necessarily think he's the best manager in the world. And as things fell apart, I started to quietly and slowly jump on the it's time for Oli to go train. And I think that also explains, if it's from 2023, why it's faded a little bit, because remember, it's now February, which means the Cardinals haven't lost a baseball game in somewhere around 4 or 5 months. And so I think a lot of that, the fatigue of the offseason has kind of set in, where you have some people who, they might be okay with it. And also then there's spring training and the positivity that comes around with that. So I think that's kind of what you're seeing here.
I think a lot of it stems from the original shock of Schilt being fired, a guy that at that point a lot of people liked. He'd gotten us in the postseason 2 times in a row, and had led just a 17-game winning streak that no one saw coming. It was a miraculous comeback to get in the postseason.
Yeah.
And then they hired this guy that everyone thinks is underexperienced, is just there to be, basically a Muppet for the front office, which I don't really agree with, but that's what the perception is. And that coupled with I don't know if he's an arrogant guy. I don't really think he is actually arrogant, but sometimes the way he talks and the way he presents himself comes across that way to fans. And a lot of that's off-putting. So I think it's a mixture of a few things. And losing 90 games is also very bad. So that's probably why as well.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And something that I reflect on a lot that I don't necessarily see people talk about is before that win streak in 2021, they were one of the most frustrating teams in baseball. And you could point to a lot of the same issues the Ollies had to deal with. They had a depleted pitching staff, and they had to kind of invest in some random arms to get them through the second half. So I don't necessarily think Schilt was dealt any better or worse cards than Ollie has for most of his tenure. But I mean, people remember the 17-game win streak, and it's awesome. But like without that, I think Schilt would have gotten fired, and people would have been fine with it. But then I don't know. That's how you end. That makes a difference. A lot of people. I would probably tend to lean with you, Caleb, that I do think it's probably started with that. People were already skeptical coming in. And then 2022, it didn't necessarily start well either. They had a strong second half again. They got them into the playoffs. Obviously, the playoffs went poorly. And then 2023 blew up as well. So thinking of 2023, though, Caleb, let's start with you on this one. How much of the Cardinals' issues from last season do you put on Oli Marmol's shoulders?
I think everyone in that clubhouse, players, managers, coaches, front office, everybody should be held accountable to some extent. Like none of them are innocent in this. It takes a group effort to be as bad and dysfunctional as they were. But that being said, I can't sit here and say, well, Mo built a faulty roster that just didn't work. It didn't look like it was going to work. And then it was bad. And then say, well, Ollie should have done better. That doesn't make any sense. You have to pick one almost at that point. I think some of it does. I do think he needs to do a better job at some things. But honestly, like people bring up end-game managing. Every manager is bad at in-game managing to their fan base because they all make mistakes. It happens. So for me, maybe could have done better things in the clubhouse, but I'm not in there, so I don't know that. So I don't put a lot of it on him. I put a lot of it on roster construction and players playing poorly. But I don't know because I'm not in the clubhouse, so I can't really give a fair assessment of how he was in there. But the players didn't turn on him, which I think is a big nod at him because most seasons that go that drastically bad, you hear really bad things out of the clubhouse. We didn't really. So
true. What about you, Sandy?
It's interesting you say it's a clubhouse / players issue or roster construction issue. I've been saying that for a long time, but I've kind of come down on the other side of it. For a long time, I've really leaned towards it's not a roster construction problem because I think if it was, we would have seen clear differences between the 2023 roster and other rosters the Cardinals have had that have succeeded. So I've pointed that and I say, look, the Cardinals had a bad pitching staff. Sure. They had underperformance. Sure. But those are things that they've overcome in previous seasons. You look at the 2021 season where, yes, the win streak was miraculous and you're not going to just do that every year. But the Cardinals almost have done that. The 2020 team had clear issues. The 2019 team had lots of problems. Even those teams that stayed relevant through 2016, 2017, and 2018, they had huge flaws, but they performed far better than this team. But also, I don't think it's necessarily manager performance because I'm somebody that doesn't assign a ton of value to managers in the first place. So I think it's just a player performance issue. I think you had players not do their job last year. And that starts at the top with Nolan Arenado and Paul Goldschmidt, who both had big time down seasons, lots of bad luck, lots of bad sequencing, injuries. So all of that, I'm not sure it's a roster construction issue, although at least they've addressed some of the concerns that we had. But yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I think I still lean it's roster construction, but I think I pepper in some of your thoughts there, Sandy, of like they had clear roster construction issues in past years, but they would have Paul Goldschmidt to carry them through or Nolan Arenado to carry them through or Adam Wainwright putting on a spectacular performance, or they just had guys that were stoppers who were playing at a superstar level that kept them from being a below 500 team to just at 500, just a few games above. Really should be playing worse than they are, but they're kind of still in it. They get those 2 arms, 3 arms, and they make a run. When last year they didn't have that. They had spurts of guys playing well. Like Arenado had a hot streak in May, but that didn't last long. Jordan Montgomery went on a run, but the rest of the rotation was awful. Like I think it was they had these issues that had compounded over time. So I would argue, maybe I don't know, like what year was it? 2021 when Oviedo was just getting thrown out there it was just like what is happening? So it wasn't actually throwing out Wainwright last year was worse than Oviedo. So I don't know if I can say
it's a little different though. It's a little different. I feel
that's true.
I also think part of it, like they started 10-24. If they start 15-19, I think they made the playoffs. I do. But I think 10-24. Like, do you remember that series in Boston where Gorman went crazy and they won 2 games against Kenley Jansen?
Yeah.
They were showing life again, and they were coming back to be the team we thought they could be.
Yeah.
But 10-24 is just too big of a hole. Like, we were looking at all the statistics of it. Only 2 teams ever had come back and made the playoffs from a 10-24 hole. So I think that would just compounded, and then they blamed Wilson, and just it was a disaster from there on out.
Big snowball effect.
Like, I think if they start just like not horrible and just like okay, or just maybe even just bad and not horrible, I think they probably get back on track, but they just bury themselves early.
Totally agree. So even if for the most part we don't throw it on Oli's shoulders last year, what do you think are some fair criticisms of him from last year? Because again, we all 3 agree he's not blameless by any means in this, but what are some things that Oli can own from last year?
Oli can own the way he addressed players publicly last year. And maybe, obviously, I'm not in the clubhouse. I don't know everything. There's a good chance that he and Tyler O'Neill did have some sort of conversation before that happened. But for those of us on the outside looking in, it just was bad. It looked terrible. It looked like a clubhouse that was not unified. And it looked like they were really making a guy who at that point in time, we still said, this is one of the best players on the team. This is maybe the most talented player outside of your superstars on the roster. And you're just making him upset. And it's something that just came across poorly. I think Oli can own that. And I think Oli can change the way public calling out of players works moving forward.
Yeah, I agree with that. I do think there was more to that story than we know. Sure. I think it had boiled over to a point where they were frustrated. There's a lot of stuff out there about them being frustrated that he didn't come back and play in the postseason in 2022 when they felt he could have. I think there was just a lot of stuff there. But I do agree, like there's no upside to calling him out in the media at all. Mm-hmm. I don't need to know that, handling your clubhouse. But I do think a lot of that falls on the player leadership. Like Arnaldo Goldschmidt, whoever it is that you want to be the leader of your clubhouse, that's the guy that should be handling that, not Oli Marmol, in my opinion. And honestly, like I don't know things that he did horribly last year, just because they were so bad. It's hard to even disperse whose fault it was.
Yeah.
In-game management's one thing. I try not to harp on that too much unless it's egregious, just because they have data I don't have on why they do things. But I do think his overall demeanor when he's in the media could be better, just to relay to fans his message better. But
yeah, I think too, you go back to it's hard to tell the issues and because they're so bad. I mean, you would have games where Jack Flaherty, it's okay, maybe that's not good because they made the trades later. Maybe Dakota Hudson, it's the 4th inning and it's okay, it's the 3rd time through the lineup now and he is at 100 pitches and it's okay, Oli, do you want to leave Dakota Hudson in for the 3rd time through the order and he's already up in pitch count, or do you want to go to Casey Lawrence here? What is he supposed to do?
There are 2 terrible options.
I just sometimes I just pull my own hair out because I'm what is Oli supposed to do here? I think there's been a narrative going around that they didn't have an innings issue because they actually ranked decently high in starting pitch innings last year. I'm okay, please go tell me those Drew Rom starts where he made it into the 6th inning were the right thing for them to do, or Dakota Hudson. Yeah. And I looked last year and I've been doing some stuff about quality starts, and I think they only got 18 quality starts out of the 60 starts from Rom, Hudson, Wainwright, Liberatore, Thompson, and someone else. It was bad. So obviously the back end of the rotation is a lot stronger in my opinion now. And so I think you're going to see these decisions make a bigger difference this year where Oli can, does he keep Gray in for the 7th inning or does he go to Kittredge here? I think those things actually matter now. Last year was just he's just trying to get through the year and who really cares what's going on. But maybe there were some times where Alec Burleson would get the pinch hit at bat when Nolan Gorman was on the bench. And it's I guess the analytics said go Burleson here, but it's
crazy. That guy was 0 for 41.
You have Nolan Gorman here. I think that's probably the call. There's stuff like that always kind of rubbed me the wrong way. But to your point, Caleb, it feels like every manager is frustrated or every fan base is frustrated with how their manager manages games. So, and I really just don't think it makes much of a difference when you're a losing ball club than when you're a team that's supposed to win games. I don't know. How many games a year does a manager really impact? 5, 6, maybe?
Not many.
And I'd say 3 or 4 is probably more realistic. And it's when you're a competitive team, you can notice the difference there between a 92 win team and an 88 win team. I don't know. I feel like 2022, Oli proved that he was able to manage a good clubhouse, gets into the playoffs. 2023 is such a mess that it's hard to tell. And so going back to that poll earlier, I'm optimistic about Oli. And actually, I need to stop because I know we're kind of giving our opinions now, but we'll do it at the end. But I
Mm-hmm.
think 2024 is the year where we really get to see him show, okay, you've got the roster that's at least should be competitive. Now go do something with it. Sandy, you have more thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, I just want to say real quick before we move on, there are a couple other things too that I actually think. So, for example, I think Oli mismanaged Giovanni Gallegos over and over again last year, and it just Giovanni is
Fair.
the type of guy, and anyone who's watched him for multiple years knows he either has it or he doesn't. And there were plenty of times that it was clear he didn't have it last year, and Oli would leave him in. Actually, he gave up like 9 homers all year, and I think they came in either 4 or 5 games total. So it was really clear to me, like there was a night against the Astros where he came in, he walked 2 guys, gave up a single, and then that's the 3-batter minimum. Get him out of there. It's clear he doesn't have it. He wasn't locating. His pitches just looked awful. And then Oli left him in. He gave up 2 bombs and we lost. There were a couple nights like that where I was like, that is a terrible decision that really did cost the Cardinals. And it was just frustrating. But also, like Caleb said, there are other analytics that he has access to. And maybe the analytics were telling him leave him in, even though that would make no sense to me. But you're right. For the most part, managers don't impact the game as much as fans tend to think. So
the thing that's also tough about that, like when you have a reliever come in, obviously they have to get 3 outs unless they're ending an inning. But if you're like that worried about Gallegos, who at the time was their second best reliever, largely considered that.
It's true.
That you have to have a reliever up and warmed up immediately when he comes in the game.
It's true.
That's once again roster construction, in my opinion.
Yep. Totally agree. Because it's like you could look at Hicks, Helsley, Gallegos, and JoJo all at different points and they were good, but they never all 4 good at the same time.
Yeah, injuries, trades. Yeah.
So you basically had 1, maybe 2 relievers you could rely on at any point in the year. And then it was like, okay, Drew Verhagen, like you're a good 5th inning, 6th inning guy, but we don't want you in the 8th. But we kind of got to go to you here. Or
it's true.
Let's see what Liberatore can give here. Let's see what John King. Let's see what Jacob Barnes can do.
Alec Burleson.
Ryan Tepera.
That's true. Yeah. No, that's a good point. And I think also though, injuries last year, we haven't talked about it enough, how bad injuries just really hurt this team. I mean, coming into the season, the bullpen looked okay. You had a 3-headed monster with Hicks, Helsley, and Gallegos. And if Hicks is not actually awful to start the season, where to the point where we're talking about a DFA, and if Helsley's healthy, that bullpen is fine. That bullpen probably wins you a lot more games. But like you said, you just didn't have any of them together at the same time. It was only 1. And then by the time guys are healthy, you're trading Hicks at the deadline, and Cabbies last year didn't work out with the team. So yeah, it's just really tough.
Yeah, and it kind of goes back to Caleb's point from earlier. The season just snowballed so bad at the beginning that it was like at some point, I know they went on that run in May, but then once things fell apart again, it's hard to believe you can really get it back on track unless they just had 2 straight months of dominance. And that's a lot to ask from a team. They just dug themselves such a hole that I don't think it was really possible to come out from it. So, which also, you look at the beginning of their schedule in 2024, they've got quite the mess that they've got to figure out. So I see there's a hot take from Matt in here, but we'll move into some offseason talk now too, as well, because I think Oli gave some really interesting quotes this offseason to media and then in a recent interview with Xavier Scruggs that I think really kind of gets into his mind a little bit, helps us figure out kind of how he operates as a manager. And I think has changed the opinion of a lot of people actually on him in the offseason. So before we do that, though, I want to give a quick shout out to our sponsor from this episode, which is Tracy's Karate. Tracy's Karate has been serving the local St. Louis community since 1969, specializing in private lessons for practical and effective self-defense instruction. Private lessons allow Tracy's to teach anyone, focusing on your personal goals and your own learning style. And you can try out a free half-hour private lesson today. So all you have to do is call 314-821-0555 or visit tracys.com to get more details. It's a fantastic opportunity to learn valuable self-defense skills. If you decide to sign up, let them know that the crew at the New News sent you. Again, their phone number is 314-821-0555, and the website is tracys.com. So thanks again, Tracy's, for sponsoring this episode. But real quick,
thanks, Tracy.
Yeah, that's the Max Rochik quote right there. So, but Oli gave this a 30-minute presser at winter warmup that it was really interesting being in the room with him. And Caleb, you talked earlier about how we don't know what the clubhouse looks like, and kind of the vibe I've gotten from people like Katie Wu, Jeff Jones, Derek Gold, Ben Fredrickson, people that have been in the room, is that most of them don't really think Oli lost the clubhouse by any means last year. That usually those are the people that, even if it's not publicly said, you can kind of get the vibe of what it was. And they never really got the vibe that the clubhouse was an issue. But one of the things I think Oli was very clear and upfront to do during that time with media is that he took accountability for what went wrong in 2023. And it would have been really easy for him to pass the blame around and point to a variety of different issues. But pretty much anytime he was asked about how 2023 went, he would just say it was unacceptable and it was on him. What does that tell you about Oli as a manager? That, I mean, in the past, I think we can talk about different ways he seemed a little bit arrogant, but at least coming out of this offseason, it seems like he's been very quick to point the finger at himself and figure out ways for this team to improve. So Caleb, what is that like when you hear quotes like that from Oli? What does that tell you about him as a manager?
I think it tells you he's a pretty good leader. Like, that's what I think it tells you. And we've seen this from Oli from the beginning. I just think a lot of people were like, just didn't like him from the beginning for whatever reason, like we talked about earlier. But I remember when Helsley had that issue in game 1 of the wild card series, and the finger issue, and it snowballed and they lost. After that, he went on Hot Take Central with Jim Hayes and Charlie Marlowe, and he said, are there things I can be better at? Let's have a conversation about it. He's never one of those guys that shuts people down like Mike Schill used to do. Where he'd kind of give it back to people and say, well, what would you do differently? It's more like he actually wants to have a conversation. Yeah. So I do think he is a good leader in that, right? And also, like, you've seen Arenado come out and talk about him in very positive ways. Same with Goldie. That doesn't happen if people genuinely don't like him. So I do think he's a good leader. Now, if that translates to wins on the field, we got to see. It didn't last year. But I do think he does a good job in that aspect of things, at least.
Yeah. Sandy, is that kind of the vibe you got?
I think it's a great point. I love these quotes from Oli. It's clear he's coming out. He's more humble than I think people anticipated. I think that's a really good thing. It's a good quality in a leader. But that leaves a lot of room for people to say it's a prove it year. And if it doesn't work, then he's teeing people up to dunk on him and say, okay, it is your fault. So, but I like that. I like that he's willing to put it on the line there. I think that's a really good thing.
Yeah. Another common theme that came up a lot from him was trust. He talked a lot about how, as a manager and as a coaching staff, you have to earn the trust of the players, but the clubhouse also needs to trust each other. And I think there's a reason he kept reiterating trust as something for 2024. I think he was pretty clear. You watch this team in 2023, and even if they hadn't lost trust in Oli as a whole clubhouse, I think there are pockets of distrust and pockets of distrust between players. What are some areas, if you can pinpoint it, where you think last year that lack of trust, maybe it's a certain player situations or on the field performance, where you could see that shine through? Sandy, is there any examples you can think of? I know there's a couple glaring ones, but you can go to there or you can go to some other places too.
Yeah. Man, it's all over. I think something that hasn't been talked about enough, there are a lot of players you could tell really pressing. I think that really affected Jordan Walker early in the season. It felt like he was just trying to do way too much, both at the plate and in the field. Like in the field, you'd have him, for example, diving in to make a play instead of just sitting back and letting it fall for a single, and then it gets to the wall and it's a triple. Yeah. Stuff like that, where it felt like this team, once they got down, they got in this mindset of we can't lose no matter what. And so you had guys trying to just do, like I said, way too much. And I think, honestly, that was the entire clubhouse. I think that was almost everybody. You can point to different moments where it's clear, that guy's not doing his job at the plate. He's trying to smash the ball out of the park, or that guy's trying to make a play he knows he can't make. And it's going to end up costing the team more. Yeah.
Caleb, anything standing out for you?
I think when it comes to trust between players, I don't know specifically anything, but I can imagine that when you're, Nolan Arenado at third base, you just hit a homer in the 6th inning, you're up 1 run. And then you see these guys coming out of the bullpen who have blown 10 games in a row at that point. Your trust is a little bit off. And, I don't know specifically if that's the case, but I can imagine that there are trust issues develop when you feel like you're doing your job and there's whole parts of the team that aren't doing their job, and it just creates a snowball effect. But I didn't get like a vibe where they were super separated all the time. But I do remember that one. Do you remember that video? They were in Texas, and Jordan Walker hit a homer, and there was a video of the dugout, and everyone, not one human being besides Andrew Kisner was clapping.
That's why Andrew Kisner's
a little bit of that going on. Was captain. Now he's captain. Now he's captain of the Rangers. Funny enough, but I do feel like there were things like that going on where they would just seem checked out at times.
Yeah. Well, and if you're Jordan Walker, you hit that go-ahead home run down in Miami, and then they blow maybe the biggest moment of your career to this moment. Like, that sucks. And you're right. It'd be so hard to trust somebody after that.
Yeah, and I think there's some other, like, it's hard to exactly pinpoint these, but I mean, Tyler O'Neill came out and said that he had kind of respect at an arm's length with Oli after that situation, which again, it's better than what people said it is, but trust at an arm's length is not like real trust. That doesn't give me the vibe of a dugout in a clubhouse where people are really in this together. You have the Jack Flaherty, Miles Michaelis both coming out this offseason saying, taking accountability for kind of blaming Wilson Contreras. Again, that doesn't feel like a clubhouse that trusts each other when they're asking for their new shiny catcher to be removed from catching duties early on. It just seems like there was a lot of issues around that. And also the lack of clarity with roles. Like, you have Tyler O'Neill come in as the starting center fielder, and like a month later it's Lars Nootbaar, and then Dylan Carlson gets a chance, and then Dylan Carlson's back to being the fourth outfielder that doesn't really play ever. And I feel like guys were kind of frustrated by their roles too. And that's something that Dylan Carlson kind of alluded to at winter warm-up, that I don't think he's super happy with being the fourth outfielder again. So I think for the most part, a lot of those situations have been kind of weeded out at this point in all these terms, but I do think it's something to keep an eye on going into this year for sure. And then another thing that I really think it was really interesting from that press conference is Oli talked a lot about the idea of surrounding himself with really good leaders. And if you look at the guys he's hired as his bench coaches, it was Skip Schumacher, then it was Matt Holliday, who ended up stepping out. So then it was Joe McEwing, and now it's Danny Descalso. And so he keeps bringing in these guys that are highly capable leaders, that guys that could take his job if they really wanted to. Obviously, he signed up on Yachty being a part of the clubhouse, and actually he wanted him to be around more than Yachty's going to be right now. So he was inviting more. And there's just really interesting quote, because I think it was Brandon Kiley asked him, like, how does that make you feel? Maybe it was Jeff Jones. It's like, Oli, like, does that make you uncomfortable? And I loved his response. He said, it's a high stakes environment. If you're insecure, then the seat's not for you. It's as simple as that. You want to have the best people around you at all times. And that means you're hiring people that can one day do your job. I've seen criticism, oddly enough, about Oli surrounding himself with great leaders, saying that it's like a sign of not good leadership, that you need good people around you. You can already tell how I feel about that. What does that tell you about Oli's mentality as a leader, Caleb, that he would invite that kind of level of leadership around him?
I think it just tells you that he wants to win. Like, I've never once questioned Oli's desire to win, desire to, bring home a championship to St. Louis. Has he succeeded at that? No, he hasn't. But I've never questioned that desire. I also think the argument that you just brought up was like, well, he's weak, so he needs to bring all these guys back that can be managers somewhere. Bill Belichick might be the greatest football coach of all time. Every single coordinator that man has gets a head coach job somewhere else because he surrounds himself with people that will help his team succeed. And if you're going to be insecure and say, well, I don't want Yachty here or Descalso or, Schumacher because they might take my job, then you're probably not built to be a leader anyway, because you're going to be looking over your shoulder all the time.
Yeah.
So I like that he's bringing these guys in. Could Yachty being in the clubhouse have maybe caused a little bit of issues with people going to him instead of Oli? Maybe. But it's also like, do you want Yachty in your locker room? I mean, clubhouse and dugout? Yeah. So I think it's a good sign.
Totally agree. I think it's a vibe that we didn't necessarily get from previous managers as well. I think there are questions about Matheny's coaching staff at times. I don't have those questions about Oli's coaching staff. It's clear where his focus is. His focus is on winning a championship. And like you said, Caleb, he hasn't done that yet. But it's clear that at least the intentions are there.
For sure. And again, it's intentions, the leadership qualities, all this stuff. It doesn't necessarily mean Oli gets a free pass on things. I don't think anyone's saying that here. So if people are listening to this being like, why you act like Oli's the greatest thing since sliced bread, we're not. It's just he has the qualities of a good manager, and it's hard to find those. Like, managers get fired all the time. And so I get he had a bad year. We'll talk more about it, but it's clear that Oli has a lot of the intangibles you need to be a good leader. But at the end of the day, I mean, players can continue to get opportunities because of potential. Managers don't. Managers get opportunities because they win ball games. And so one winning season, one losing season, 2024 contract year, it's clear that this is going to matter. I also like that the Cardinals have surrounded him with more leaders this year instead of, they didn't necessarily fire anyone from his staff. They obviously moved McEwing up to the front office. But their coaching staff was thin last year. It's been talked about for the past few years that they carry less coaches than most teams around baseball. And so they've brought in multiple different guys to help bring things. So so let's move off the winter warm-up a little bit. And the Xavier Scruggs interview kind of came out about a week or two ago, and I feel like that one kind of blew up a lot. And so if there's anything from the interview you guys remember or want to bring up, go for it. But one of the first things that I think people really latched onto was Oli's conversation about the expectations in St. Louis, and that, like, you hear from John Mozeliak all the time, let's get into the playoffs, see what happens. Let's win the division. You have to get to the playoffs to make it happen. I never hear that from Oli. It's always, this city expects to win a World Series, and that's what's on my mind. I feel like he embodies the kind of mentality that Cardinal fans want. Sandy, do you agree with that? Do you feel like it's more talk, but not necessarily the kind of leader he is? Like, what do you think? Do you think Oli's expectations fit the expectations of this fan base?
Yeah, I think so. Oli came in and immediately was like very forward about, I want to win a title. I'm here to win. I'm not here to get to the playoffs. I'm here to win. And maybe Cardinals fans get the sense of, we're just here to make the playoffs from the front office and from ownership especially. But from Oli, no, I don't think he has that vibe. And I think it fits what Cardinals fans want.
Yeah, I agree. I also think there's a misconception, I think, about what just making the playoff means. I think for Mozeliak, it means, the 2 years we won the World Series since I've been here in 2006 and 2011, that those teams should not have won the World Series.
Yeah.
So the teams that were really good, 2004, 2015 was a really good team. 2013 was a great team. They all lost. So I think they've just kind of come to be like, well, if we make it, we have a chance. And that's true. That's been proven right. But if you're a manager and you have that mentality, that's really bad. Like, you should not have that mentality at all, because then that goes on to your players and then they start believing that. And that's obviously not what he's going to do. 100%. So I like that he doesn't have that and he has high expectations for himself. But I also think that's what should be expected. Like, it's nothing that's special to me. He should have that. Because if Mike Schilt would have come out, like when he was here, and said, hopefully we get in and see what happens, he'd be like, well, how little faith do you have in your players? So I do like that he says that, but I also think he should,
Yeah, for sure. B. Burke said, have we watched Oli's interview with Xavier Scruggs? That's what we're talking about right now. And one of the things I also thought was really interesting was there's this part where Scruggs kind of asks Oli about criticism and about feedback from people. And Oli basically goes out and says he loves to have conversations. He invites that if you don't listen to people, you're not learning and you're not a leader. And so that as a manager, he has to surround himself and let people ask him hard questions, let people get under his skin a little bit, have difficult conversations with players, media, explain his thought process, and make sure that he's doing everything he can to learn from mistakes, or at least be able to explain why he made a decision. Because at the end of the day, you can make a good decision and have the wrong results. And you can also make a bad decision and have good results. And so it's a results-oriented business, but the process needs to be sound. And Caleb, on that side, like, I know we've talked, and it's been, I think, kind of thought of a lot about Oli, that he's a little bit arrogant at times. And maybe there have been seasons where he's done that or come across like that. But when you hear that kind of thought process from him, what does that tell you, again, about his managing style?
I don't think he's arrogant at all. I really don't personally. I've met him a few times. He's always been very nice to me. I worked on the grounds crew. I would talk to him after games. Very nice guy. He never came across as arrogant then, and he doesn't really to me. But people do have that perception. Yeah. I just think he does enough prep with his analytics guys, with coaching, pitching coaches, hitting coaches, to where they have a plan and he's confident in what he's doing. So if you have something that you can say that legitimately counters what he did, I think he'd like to hear it, because he'd like to be able to use that later on. But I also think he kind of knows that most of his decisions are pretty sound in theory, and his reasoning might be different than you. Like you guys said earlier, that an example of Burleson hitting instead of Gorman. If you're a fan, you're like, why is that happening? But there could be a reason. Maybe Gorman's back is hurting that day and they didn't tell you because they didn't want that to be known for the next day. Like things like that could be in there and we just don't know. And he has to explain that, and it comes across as excuse making when in reality it's just him describing to you what was going through his mind at the time.
Yeah, and that's something I think either in this interview or another point this offseason said himself, is that there's times where he wishes he could give people the full picture of what happens. And I feel like he actually talks a lot more about the process than most managers do. Like, he's way more open than I can remember any Cardinal manager really being, at least publicly in a press conference. I've heard Tony La Russa usually was pretty open with reporters, like when they talk about one, but like not like press conference right after the game. Like it didn't really feel like that. But he alluded to that, Caleb, that like there's just times where he can't reveal things. It's just not right to reveal what a player is going through, or why the decision that they decide to sit out that day, or an injury they're going through. And so that's frustrating as a fan. But again, that's a sign of good leadership, is that sometimes you take bullets for the people that you lead so that they can go out and perform better. Sandy, is that kind of the vibe you're getting as well from Oli?
Yeah, absolutely. And the more we've sat here, the more I've thought about it. I really do think a lot of the frustration with Oli comes from frustration with the front office, from fans. And it's a perception thing. Caleb used that word in his answer, and it really got me thinking here. And is Oli a yes man for the front office? I don't think so. Because we just heard something recently about how Oli gets to make his own decisions, and Oli chooses who plays on a given day. Now, that could be a whole other problem based on how much Taylor Motter played last year. But again, we don't know the full picture.
No, that's bad. That's bad.
It is bad. But the thing is, people have associated him with this front office, and the Schilt firing helps that even more with the philosophical differences thing and using that buzzword over and over again to describe what was going on. But that's a front office thing. That's not an Oli thing. So again, I really like what he's done this offseason. I like his attitude. He comes across as humble. He's eager. He's hungry. Those are all really good qualities for a manager, especially going into the season.
I also have one more thought on the yes man conversation, because we hear that a ton. And
that's where I wanted to go next. So let's go.
Oh yeah, go ahead. Okay, so if you're a general manager and you're looking to hire a manager, are you going to hire someone who's going to tell you no every time you tell them to do something? If you're the CEO of a company and you want to hire a general manager for one of your districts, are you going to hire someone who doesn't agree with you and your philosophy? So why, when we say these guys are like intertwined, they should be. It'd be really bad to have a disconnect from the front office and the manager, which is what we saw with Schilt, who, reports out there that him and Jeff Albert didn't have the best relationship. And that was part of the reason why he was let go, because he was, overstepping his bounds as the manager. But I don't, like, you should be in lockstep with your general manager, or else it's just a dysfunctional organization. So that kind of frustrates me, because like Kevin Cash is one of the best managers in baseball. That dude is more in lockstep with the Rays front office than maybe any manager is with their front office.
Yeah.
It's just how it is.
Yep.
Yeah. And you look at the job that Mike Schilt just took over for. You have Bob Melvin, who's universally regarded as one of the best managers in baseball, who had one of the best rosters we thought going into the season, with an incredibly aggressive GM that people have mixed feelings on, but most people think highly of AJ Preller, and it fell apart last year. And all this stuff starts to come out that Preller and Melvin were like at odds and did not agree on anything. Horrible. It's like, that's a horrible culture to have when your two most important key leaders don't agree on things. So there's a difference between being a puppet and being in line philosophically. And I do agree. And I do think it's clear that Oli and the front office are in line when it comes to philosophical. I don't want to use that. It's a loaded term with us right now, but like, they're on the same page about things. But I don't think John Mozeliak or Michael Gersh or anyone's coming down to the dugout any day and saying, hey, this is the lineup. Here's how far this guy can go in the game. Here's the pitching changes. They feed him information, yes, because analytics at the end of the day is more information. It's more information to make good decisions. But then Oli talked about, it's like at the end of the day, he has to balance the numbers with the guts, with the situation in life that the player's in right now. Maybe Nolan Gorman needs this moment. Maybe it would make more sense, or maybe Alec Burleson needs this moment. Maybe it makes sense to go with Gorman here, but if I give Alec Burleson this chance, it's going to boost his confidence. It's going to help him for the next month. Like these decisions you have to make as a people person, that I think Oli does that. But at any time you make a wrong decision, it's quick. They're quick to either call him a puppet or he's a horrible manager, and sometimes both, which I don't get that. I don't get how people could be like, Oli sucks and he does everything they tell him to do. And it's like,
but
which one is it? Yeah, it's like,
fault.
It's his fault that it's like, anyways, I could rant on for days about the arguments that don't make sense that fans make about both sides of things. But Sandy, anything you want to add with that at all?
Yeah, you brought up something really interesting there, talking about managing people instead of just players. And that's something fans never consider. This is merging something you said with what Caleb said earlier about not knowing everything that's going on. So we have no idea whether players are feeling good. You're absolutely right. Maybe Gorman didn't bat a lot of the time because of his back. Maybe Helsley, who notoriously is not ready to take the ball a lot of the time, isn't getting that opportunity because he's not ready to go that day. Maybe someone had a hiccup in warmups and felt something that they don't want to feel. And so now, they're with the trainers. But the other thing, like you said, we have no idea what's going on personally for these players. We have no idea how they're feeling, whether they're in the game that day, whether they're ready to go. And that's something that Oli has to consider too. And so that's just another level and another layer of information that we as fans don't have access to. And we can't really even comment on that. So again, that's just another thing managers have to consider. And it's another reason to really weigh what you're going to say and think about it carefully before you criticize in-game decisions.
Yeah. A couple of really interesting comments from Henderson and Wellman Agency on here is, if you look back at Tony La Russa's first few years at the Cardinals, it wasn't good. I think it was like, I think he had a good year in his first year and then was way below 500 the second year. And then like about 5, like it took a while to get things going until 2000 when things started to go. And then also, like, anyone remember Colby Rasmus? Anyone? Like, that was a terrible situation. And I don't think we look back on Tony as a guy who couldn't manage personalities because he was at odds with Colby Rasmus and his dad. So I don't really understand why Oli doesn't get a break with, I mean, it's clear. I mean, John Mozeliak called out Tyler O'Neill multiple times too. It wasn't just Oli. It's not like everyone's looking at Oli being like, what the heck, dude? We love Tyler. Absolutely. It's like, I don't think they didn't like Tyler. I just think there was a lot of frustration there. And I'm so glad that Tyler gets to have an opportunity in Boston now, because I think I hope he does great this year, but it just wasn't going to happen in St. Louis. And I mean, that's also life sometimes. You can have two great people and they just don't mesh and you have to go your separate ways, and that's okay. Something though, like about the people conversations I thought was interesting. I'm curious what your guys' thoughts are on this, is that Oli talked about how he would approach, except I was kind of confused because he kind of talked later about how he doesn't approach conversations the same way, but he did say that he would approach Albert Pujols and Mason Wynn the same way and that he would give them the same amount of respect. But then he did say something later that like respect is earned from a guy like Albert. So I think there is a little bit of a difference. But what does that tell you about Oli, that when, at least in theory, when he comes up to Ryan Tepera and Paul Goldschmidt, I don't know, maybe he didn't handle this the same, but
he was there for 2 days.
Yeah, that's true. How about
it didn't really have a chance.
Let's go with Dakota Hudson and Paul Goldschmidt. That Oli handles those with the same respect and care that he would his superstar and the 26th man on the roster. Is that the right way a manager should be going about things?
Yes. Absolutely. That's a big deal. It tells you that he treats his players like adults. He treats his players like professionals. It really reminds me of something, if you guys are familiar with Bud Grant, one of the greatest coaches in NFL history. He talked all the time about how he approached his players with respect and deference and understood that they were adults and that they were professionals and they were perfectly capable of motivating themselves and doing things themselves. I love that Oli treats his players that way, because at the end of the day, they might be like Mason Wynn might be a 21-year-old kid, but he's also an adult playing professional baseball, and you should treat him that way. And having that kind of standard for everybody is just the right way to go about things. No way around that.
Yeah, I think it's a good thing. And, we used to not see rookies come up and make massive impacts as often as we do now. Like now it seems like, guys like Gunnar Henderson, Adley Rutschman come up and immediately are great.
True.
I think a lot of that's because the hazing and earn your way culture is gone. And it's turned more to, hey, we need you. We need 40 to 50 guys every year to come up and be good, to be a successful team. So we're going to treat you that way. And I think a lot of that, like Oli, we've seen a lot of players come up and have a lot of success when Oli is there. 2022, we saw Yepez and Gorman and Donovan all come up and have a lot of success. Last year, we saw it with Jordan Walker, and Mason Wynn struggled, but he never looked like he was, nervous or anything, like he wasn't comfortable. So I do think that is a big thing, especially for a team like the Cardinals that are very reliant on people coming up and making an impact every single year to be successful. You need to have a manager that can handle that the right way.
Totally. And then honestly, like one of the most underrated things that we didn't really get to see much of is Oli, like in 2 years, his first year as a manager, had to deal with having a franchise legend return in Albert Pujols, who was bad to start. Like he had to figure out, how on earth am I going to tell Albert that you're not even going to play against left-handed pitching anymore, that you're barely going to play. And then somehow, some way, he kept patience with him. He played him in different spots. He built that confidence back up. And then Albert had the second half, like the dream second half. Now, I'm not trying to say Oli was the reason, but Yeah, he's part of it. And that's a huge situation for a rookie manager who was like 30. I can't remember how old he was, but he's the youngest manager in baseball. And then you have a top 5 player in all of baseball history on your team who is a franchise icon. And you have to balance all these things. Like, I just think Ollie's been thrown a lot of weird situations so early on. And again, none of us are going to tell you he's perfect with it, but I do think his reasonings usually really sound a lot of this. But as we're kind of wrapping all this up, obviously, I think we've been pretty pro Oli on this, but I do want to say, like, at the end of the day, do you think Oli is the right manager for the Cardinals? Caleb, are you confident in Oli as the Cardinals manager right now? Or do you think this is something they should have changed last year or whatever, or maybe not even hired in the first place?
I try not to be a homer very often. I try not to be. I am, but I try not to be. I'm an Oli fan. I'm just gonna say it. I like Oli. I like the way he conducts himself. I think he's very smart. I like his reasoning he gives. I think he is the right guy to do what they want him to do, which is blend analytics, which is, by the way, like we just said, information. It's gotten a bad rap. It's just information. Absolutely. It's now, instead of saying, well, the ball sounds different off his bat, it's just, oh, well, how hard was it? We know the number.
Totally.
Now. So I think he's good at blending that and relationships. So yeah, I do think he's the right guy moving forward. I do. I believe that. That being said, if they lose 90 games again, he should be fired. Like, that's just the world we're in. I thought Gabe Kapler got a really raw deal in Philadelphia. He went on to San Francisco, had success, and then he just got fired again. That's just the way we are. You can be the right manager, but be in the wrong time to be that manager.
Yeah,
I believe he is. I just hope that the team doesn't crumble again. And if it does, you kind of do have to look at it, because you can't have that 2 times in a row. I still like Oli. I think he's good at what he does. And I know it's uncommon. Hopefully he shows it this year, because I think he did in 2022. When, like you said, he had a really tough situation there with Albert and Yadi. Like, you had to figure out neither of them were very good most of the time. Albert was great the second half. Yadi wasn't great at all. And you had to figure that out. And he did it and got him 93 wins. More wins than Mike Schilt ever managed to. So I do think he is the right guy, but time will tell.
Sandy, what do you think?
Something that hasn't been talked about from the 2020 season. You mentioned Yadi. We talked mostly about Albert. Yadi, there were some questions about Yadi with the team too. He just kind of disappeared for a little while and went back to watch his basketball team. And fans are going to let him have the pass. And if anyone's earned that pass, it's Yadier Molina, franchise soldier, legend, cornerstone, Hall of Famer, Cardinals Hall of Famer. His number's getting retired. They're building a statue. He's going to be on that left field wall. You can say all of that about Yadier Molina, but the facts are Yadi was not there for a significant portion of last season. We didn't really know what was going on. He was rehabbing away from team facilities. And that's something that a rookie manager also had to deal with. That's crazy. That's really hard to deal with. How do you tell him what, you know what I mean? So I thought that was something. But if I have to choose, like, yes or no, do I have to say yes or no for, is he the right manager for the Cardinals?
No, you can say wait and see, like, whatever you want.
Oh,
yeah, I mean, wait and see is my answer here, of course.
You're right, Caleb. I should have made him choose.
I'm cheating. So I'll say this. If the Cardinals were going to fire Oli Marmol, they should have done it in July. And if they were going to do that, I probably would have been like, wow, that's kind of like rash. But at the same time, I would have said, I understand why you're doing that. And we'd have somebody else, and maybe we'd be transitioning into like the Descalso era or something right now. But now that they haven't done that, Oli's the right manager for the Cardinals, because it'd be stupid to fire your manager now. And we all just need to accept that this is how it's going to happen and move on. Oli is the manager for the Cardinals. And because he's the manager, he's the right manager right now, because there's just not a better option at the moment.
I have a question.
Yeah.
If Oli Marmol were to get fired, let's say they start off 20 games under 500 or something.
Oh.
It could happen. I've seen it before.
Again?
Trust me. We've seen it before. We've seen it before. Not too long ago.
Oh.
If that were to happen and they fire Oli, John Mozeliak has to be gone too. You can't let him hire a 4th manager. He's hired 3 and fired all of them at that point. He cannot hire another one, because at that point, how can you trust him to hire somebody that's good for the job if he's had to fire 3 of them? Like, he inherited Tony La Russa. After that, it's been a couple of years and you're fired. A couple of years and you're fired. They held on to Mike Matheny way too long, because that guy was not very good at his
actual
job.
Bad manager.
He was actually
bad manager.
Not hiring Terry Francona to bring in Mike Matheny is one of the worst decisions he ever made.
I think Terry had some drug problems at the time, though, that he was dealing with. He's talked about.
You're right.
Remember, he was off for a year.
Yeah,
he had some painkiller problems because he had a back issue.
That's a good point.
So he had a lot of personal stuff. Unfortunately, I love Terry. He would have been a great manager here.
Oh yeah.
But I do like at some point he's got to go too. Then like you've got to figure it out. So I think Mo knows that. If Mo fires Oli, I think he's next. I think he knows that.
I think just because since we have a timeline in place where it's end of 2025, and the way that DeWitt, like if Oli and Mo are like this, the DeWitts and Mo are like this. At least, well, I don't know if that's true. I think Mo pushes them more than people think. But obviously, like they want him to be a part of the front office, or they want him to be a part of the ownership group or a higher level position at some point. Like he's not going to get fired. Like I don't think he's going to leave the organization after this. I think he's going to be raised up to a higher level. I think, but I do agree he shouldn't be the one to hire the next guy. I think if Oli's fired, they have to accelerate the succession plan, and that's either move Mo up quicker, or they need to, whether it's Chaim Bloom, Randy Flores, Michael Gersh, they need to identify that guy and let that guy make the decision, because the next manager is their next manager. It's not Mo's manager after 2025. And so I think if you're going to go Yadi, Chaim Bloom, if he's the next guy, has to be on board with that. You can't make that decision for him. And also, like, one of the things with Yadi too that I think is interesting, that Caleb, you brought it up, like managers get, like, they either get fired or they retire.
Yes.
So like, what on earth are they going to do with Yadi in like 7 years?
That's what I'm saying.
It's probably not going to last 2 decades. That's one that I'm just like, that could be so messy.
Yeah.
But yeah,
David Ross. Look at David Ross. Goes from like World Series hero, beloved in Chicago,
and it's just David
everybody hates him in like 5 years. I don't want that. I've been hammering home the idea that the Cardinals should not rush the Yadi timetable.
Don't rush it.
Especially because Yadi's going to get, probably voted into the Hall of Fame somewhere between 5 and 7 years from right now, or 4 and 7 years from right now. I think if he's not a first ballot guy, he's going to get in pretty quickly. When that happens, the Cardinals will retire his number. They will build the statue. And if you are like, if he's just been fired by the organization, or if he's a manager that at that point has become wildly unpopular in the city, that sucks. Yeah. Like, we shouldn't be hoping that this happens right away. And it's you're right. David Ross, the stakes are so low. It's David Ross. He was John Lester's personal catcher. Yadier Molina is the best catcher in Cardinals history, a history that includes Ted Simmons, another Hall of Fame catcher. So it just, oh my goodness. It scares me a lot to be moving down this path so quickly.
Yeah. So my take, I would say, I do think Ollie's the right guy. I'm glad he's got another chance. But at the same time, Caleb, you're 100% right. If the season goes poorly, like, it's a results business. And so they don't make the playoffs. If it's a disappointing season, Ollie's probably gone. And I think there may be a scenario where they don't do well this year and Oli keeps his job. But I think that's probably pretty slim. Like, he's on the hot seat right now. And
they have to be in it at least.
Yeah, they can't, like last year can't happen. Like, he would be gone. But if they're in it and it's clear, like, hey, like if Sonny Gray goes down with an injury and they trade for the equivalent of Jose Quintana and they barely miss the playoffs, like stuff like, or Nolan Arenado, a bunch of injuries happen and they're still competitive. It's like, okay, Oli clearly, I don't know. Again, we already talked about, I don't know how much he actually impacts the on the field performance all the time. But at that point, I think you can save his job if it goes poorly. But he probably has to make the playoffs. Probably has to win the NL Central to make it happen. So it's on. Now, my follow-up question to that, and this probably has to do with how you think the Cardinals are going to do in 2024, but how likely, give me like a percentage chance, Caleb, that you think Oli is the manager in 2025?
85%.
85.
I'm gonna say 90. So
90.
Yeah, I just don't see the Cardinals moving on from him, at least not right now. I don't see I don't see a repeat of last year in the works. And so I think if they make the playoffs, they're not canning him,
Yeah.
Schilt getting fired after a playoff, like even as bad a loss and as bad a decision as it was to have Reyes in the game, getting fired after making the playoffs is crazy. And I just can't see the Cardinals doing that again.
Yeah, I'd probably put it like 65, 70, just because I think there's a small change. Like, one of the things I do like Mo. I think he's done mostly a good job. Lately, he's been bad, though. I agree.
Yeah.
The PR stuff with him, though, dude. Like, you've been in this business long enough, you should know what to say and what not to say. And the fact that he like left the door open publicly, like even behind the scenes, you can agree that there's a chance that Yadi's the next manager. but there's no point in saying that to the media. But to leave the door open of, oh, it could be an issue this year, we'll see. That was just like, what are you doing, Mo? What are you doing?
Yeah.
So I think the fact that he's even doing that, I have to at least put it on the table that I wouldn't be shocked. I would be surprised, but I wouldn't be shocked if midseason they're not doing like horrible and they replace Mo, or not Mo, they replace Oli with Yadi. I wouldn't be like shocked by that. So I have to put some gap in there that 2025 Oli could be gone even if things don't go poorly. But I do think it will go well. I do think Oli is Mo's guy, and I do think the rest of the front office probably likes Oli too. Otherwise, I don't think they would have went this route originally, probably because Mo. It's not like Mo last year was like, oh, time to start thinking about succession plan. This has been in the works for a while. Oli's a guy that they kind of hope is around for a long time, so I'm sure Gershon, Flores are in on him. But yeah, I'd probably put it like 65, 70. But
I don't understand why people are so sure Yadi's a good major league manager. And I'm not saying he won't be. He could be great. He could be really great. What Hall of Fame player has been an amazing manager? So just
some of
because
the
you're
older
an
ones, but
yeah, but like in the last
yeah,
3 decades, was Paul Molitor. He was a really good manager, but he wasn't like a great manager.
yeah,
So it's like just because you're a great player doesn't translate to being an amazing manager. He
But
could
even
be. He
is
could
a great
be amazing,
manager.
but you got to win. So you have to have a good team that wins.
Yeah.
That's what a great manager is. You have to have Tom Brady.
Is Dave Roberts a good manager?
I think he's a good manager, but he can't get over the hump, really.
Dodgers fans don't shut up about him.
Yeah, true.
Because they're spoiled.
Yeah, but also, like, is he a good manager? He's done a lot of winning. He wins like 108 games a season. He also has super teams. And then, like, it's the same question. I thought Don Mattingly was a really good manager in Miami. I thought everybody thought Don Mattingly was a really good manager in Miami. He won Manager of the Year. And then they fired him. I just like the standards we use to judge managers are so ridiculous anyway. So
yeah. We'll have to see what happens this year. I think this is probably one of the most intriguing storylines going into the year, at least among fans. Even if the front office probably sticks with Oli. I mean, even if it's not Yadi, Danny Descalso, Stuppy Clapp, Ben Johnson, I think is their AAA manager. He's thought very highly of. Again, Matt Holliday, like he wants to be a manager one day. This could be the next gig for him. There's just a variety of other names that could throw their hat into the ring. And again, it's the Cardinals. Even if they wanted to go someone who's not associated with them, even if the season's going poorly, it's going to be one of the most sought after jobs in baseball. So even if it's not Oli, they've got other options if they have to go that route.
Yeah.
But yeah, bring back Tony.
Bring back Tony. He could be falling asleep in the second inning
again.
He like walks out to pull the batter or the pitcher, and they're like, he has to throw three batters. Tony, come back in. Come back.
Bring back Mike
wheel out.
What was that?
Mike Matheny returns.
I'd be a fan of a different fan base. I mean, franchise. Like that would be the last draw.
That's an actual bad manager. Again, I just wish Cardinal fans would think about the fact that we could have Mike Matheny, an actual bad manager who you can point to and say that guy was not good for the team.
The 2014 NLCS was one of the worst managed things to ever happen.
Oh my gosh. Oh my
Michael
God.
Wacha.
Yeah.
Oh man, what a time. Let's finish out with one fun. I don't know if it's a fun question, but one interesting question. Because Caleb, I'm curious what your thoughts are coming into the year too. Henderson Wellman, you've been fire with the questions today. So he asked about if you think the front office will regret passing on another top starter, which I think we all probably agree on. But his point was that Mozeliak at least left the door open, that's something they could try to pursue at the deadline, which I'm not sure if they actually would. But do you think the rotation is in a good enough spot that they can get to the deadline and figure things out? Or do you think April and May be the downfall of this team again? Caleb,
I think it's in a good enough spot. And here's why I think that. With 2021 and 2022, when they went on the postseason, they had to go to the deadline and address innings, and it worked. Yeah. They got innings and it worked, and they got to the postseason. Yeah. They don't have to do that this deadline, barring major injuries. That what hopefully doesn't happen. That's not what they need to focus on now. They have the innings covered, that part of it covered, which means you can at least be, slightly above 500, maybe at 500. Which Diamondbacks made the postseason with 84 wins last year. You're in the hunt if you're at 500, most likely.
Yeah.
And then that's when you need to be aggressive. The thing I'm interested in is the last few years, we haven't seen a Cardinal team that was really good. And it was kind of like a put your chips in the middle this year and see what happens because they're really good and it's a win now situation.
True.
What happens if the Cardinals are 15 games above 500 by the deadline? It's like this team, do you want to win with Arenado and Goldie or not? This is the deadline to prove it. And if a Dylan Cease trade or something makes sense at that time, they could regret it, obviously, but I think they're going to be fine at the very least and maybe even pretty good in the first half just because I think their offense and bullpen I'm really impressed with what they've done there. And I think those could carry them to the deadline.
100% agree. I think they've got enough, like, if the bullpen was in a worse spot or this lineup wasn't a top unit in baseball, I think the rotation is a major red flag. Now I think it's more of like it's passable and it gets the job done, but it's not a playoff rotation by any means. But again, that's what the deadline could be for. Also, like instead of Dakota Hudson or Jake Woodford or at least Oviedo back then, Oviedo now is a little bit of a different story. Their next men up are Zach Thompson, maybe Gordon Graceffo. Who knows? Liberatore, this could be the year. He's still 22, 23. Like he's not like
he's not washed.
He's not necessarily washed yet. I mean, Mo keeps bringing up Takao Roby, so apparently he thinks he's closer than at least they thought he was going to think. I mean, they might finally have a guy emerge that can actually be in the rotation at some point and not be a frontline guy right away, but could be a really intriguing guy. So I think they have enough to make it through where like, even if, I mean, obviously if Sonny Gray gets injured, that's a big problem, but so is if any team's ace goes down, usually it's a major problem. But now if like Gibson gets hurt, Lynn gets hurt, Michaelis gets hurt, or Matz gets hurt, like usually happens, you feel pretty good about the depth now too, which is a big deal compared to things like Drew Rom's probably 4th or 5th in the order right now. And he had 8 starts down the stretch last year. Like he's probably not going to make the rotation again. McGreevy's an afterthought at this point. Like, I feel a lot better about their depth. Sandy, do you think the rotation will make it through to the deadline?
I sure hope so. But I think so. I mean, obviously, I think no matter what, though, the Cardinals, like even if everyone's healthy, it's not going to be as good as it could have been if they added another starter. And I think that's going to be obvious. And if you know Cardinals fans, you know that if the Cardinals are below 500, people are going to be complaining. If they are at 500, people are going to be complaining. If they are 3 games above 500 in position to win the NL Central, people are going to be complaining. The only way people aren't complaining about this team is if we reach the deadline and the Cardinals are 94-0. So you're going to have people complaining about the team and the state of the pitching staff, just no matter what's going on. So you're obviously going to face that negativity. Although the more rational of us, I think, are probably still going to be annoyed because it only costs money to go out and get a guy like Jordan Montgomery. And the fault is not with having dry powder or having whatever left over. And I'll make this other argument that they could have traded for somebody and still had enough because the Cardinals have a ton of valuable young assets. But it just costs money, and that's an ownership thing. And they should have spent like they said they were going to, and they lied, whatever. Obviously, I'm very upset about this, but no, short answer, I don't think they will be doomed by May 1st the way they were last year.
Yeah. And also too, there's a little bit of potential wisdom. I'm not going to say it's the right move, but like if you trade for Dylan Cease now and last year is who he is now, well, you just gave up Tim Kentz and Brendan Donovan and whoever, and now Dylan Cease is not who you want him to be. So there might be a little bit of, to their credit, of wisdom to wait till the deadline. Now, if they don't make the move, then all of this doesn't mean anything. But if they wait till that point and they play the hot hand, or maybe it's Jesus Luzardo, or I think signing Montgomery or Snell would be different. Or who knows, maybe there's a random starter that none of us are talking about right now who becomes available at the deadline and they can go after that guy now. Or again, I mean, I hate this route, but maybe they go and get the hot hand like a Jose Quintana again, and that gets the job done. But I mean, like, it's not like people were all that time. Go ahead.
I just wish one time at the deadline, we were talking about the Cardinals making the kind of move that the Dodgers make at the deadline, which is that guy's available. He makes us better and we're already really good. But it's like, oh, that's oh my gosh, this team is really good now. It's always like we're patching a hole. And I just, and the way that they do that is they sign somebody else right now. And then they add that third big starter at the deadline. Instead, we're wondering if they'll even add a second big starter ever. So, true. But if they don't do that, which they're not going to, you're going to see complaining from all sides, no matter what. That's my opinion.
True.
True.
Yeah.
Hey, they did go and get Matt Holliday, 2008, 2009.
So Well, yeah,
Was that Walt Jocketty?
The precedence there. No, that was Mo. That was Mo.
That was Mo.
So,
Okay. What year did Mo take over exactly?
2008.
After
Like
2007.
right
Yeah, so right before 2008.
Okay. So yeah.
Yeah. Which again, I mean,
Yeah.
they also
Hopefully
put
they don't
bids on
have to
big guys
patch
before.
holes.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
what happens if they don't
Hopefully
have to patch
patch
those holes? That's kind of what I was trying to lead to with the innings thing.
Yeah.
If they don't have such an innings crunch and they don't have holes to patch, then they can kind of focus on things. And for me,
Yes.
Mo has done a lot of things wrong. He really has, honestly, lately, last few years. But one thing he has done right is at the 2 deadlines. Well, actually, all 3 last year, he did a good job too. But in 21 and 22,
Sure.
he did a great job of getting pitchers that really helped his team out. They weren't flashy. I wasn't excited about Jordan Montgomery, but he gave us a playoff run, and then Takoa Roby and Thomas Sajasi. That's what we got out of trading an injured Harrison Bader. So he's done a really good job with that. And what if he just finds another Jordan Montgomery and you put that guy with Sonny Gray? Like, that could be something. Like, look at what the Diamondbacks had to go to the World Series last year. Zach Gallen was horrible in the postseason. Merrill Kelly was great, but he's Miles Michaelis basically.
Yeah.
And Brandon Pfaadt came out of nowhere. So
yeah,
a lot of things have to go right, but we never know.
I mean, in that scenario, though, you're pretending, or not pretending, that's the wrong word, but you're assuming that the Cardinals don't currently have a hole at the number 2 spot in their rotation, which I think a lot of people would say there is a hole there. They'd say that
that's the hole
he
has to fill.
Filled.
But that's the hole he has to fill, then he's getting a good starter. That's what I'm saying. Like, they don't have to fill the back end, they have that.
Yeah,
exactly. Like the 2022 deadline, like, man, or was it 2021? Yeah, 2022 when Juan Soto was available. 2022 Juan Soto was available. It's like maybe they are a little bit more aggressive if they're also not like, hey, we need to go add 2 more starters as well. Because if they traded Dylan Carlson that deal, you can't trade Harrison Bader even though he's hurt to go get Jordan Montgomery. Like, not defending it necessarily, even though I do think passing on Juan Soto is probably the right move. I think they're in a complete mess right now if they had done that deal. But like, maybe like you can be more opportunistic when you don't have your ship isn't sinking. Like when you're going forward and you can add to this instead of being like, hey, we have to patch this hole or else we're going to go under. So who knows? But again, he hasn't been in that position in a while. So it'll be interesting to see if they can get to that position, if they decide to be aggressive. And if not, we'll kill them for it. Like they're not going to get a pass if they.
True,
so
we will.
I think sometimes people assume that we're going to defend it. I feel like right now it's like wait and see. Like that's what we're at. It's like, let's see what happens. And if it goes poorly, we're not going to be like, oh, no one cares. It's like we'll be there with you. So
71 and 91 again.
Great job. So anyways, Caleb, thanks for hopping on, man. Again, if you guys are just started tuning in or didn't catch it at the beginning, Caleb hosts the Hard 9 podcast with Mike, your dad, as well. So it's a really fun podcast to watch. You guys do a great job over there. You can follow Caleb on Twitter at CalebNoble08. Again, thanks for hopping on, man. We really appreciate you being here today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was fun. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, of course. And again, thanks to our sponsor today of today's episode, Tracy's Karate. Again, we did a little bit of a read earlier, but you can find their information about their lessons at tracys.com or 314-821-0555 and tell them we sent you there. Again, we'll be live again on Sunday. Until then, though, thank you so much for watching the Newt News podcast, and we'll see you next time.